In Orlando, Florida, authorities have released the names and ages of the 49 people who were murdered Sunday inside the Pulse nightclub. Now, they died in what became the deadliest mass shooting in American history. For most of us, the only connection that we will have to the victims are through their names, their photos, and the short stories that grieving relatives and friends have decided to share with us. Well, we consider these stories to be some of the most important that we could ever report. And while time simply will not allow us to go down this tragically long list, we are dedicating part of the program tonight to highlight three people who may or may not meet the expectations that you have of who might be dancing in a gay nightclub on the weekend. That's all the more reason to talk about them. I want you to consider with me Brenda Lee Marquez McCool. She was a 49-year-old mother of 12 children. She had fought and beaten cancer twice. Now, she died while she was out dancing with her son, Isaiah Henderson, and witnesses say that she stood in front of him to protect him. Her son survived. There's Antonio Devon Brown, a 29-year-old captain in the U.S. Army Reserve. Now, he served 2 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was also a law graduate from Florida A&M University, a military man gunned down in the club. And then there was Luis Omar Ocasio-Cortez. Now, he is one of the youngest victims at just 20 years of age. I mean, he was practically a baby. Luis studied theater. His sister says that he wanted to be a star. And had he lived, he would have auditioned today to be in a play. Well, we know that a hate of homosexuals partly motivated Omar Mateen to go on a shooting rampage. He was reportedly sickened and angered when he saw 2 men kissing in Miami. But more and more voices are revealing a side of the killer which suggests he may have been at war with his own sexuality. The man who sprayed a gay bar full of bullets may have been a gay man himself.
The final minutes of a young woman who was just out for a night of fun and dancing. Mobile phone footage from inside Orlando's Pulse nightclub. The young woman, one of the 49 victims. Police are still investigating Omar Mateen's motives. Was it an act of religiously motivated terror, or was it a personal struggle that drove him? Some witnesses say Mateen was a regular at the Pulse nightclub and also used gay dating apps. In the early hours of Sunday morning, armed with an assault rifle and a handgun, he unleashed a bloodbath inside the gay club. Survivors recall the horror.
We genuinely hit the ground. I grabbed and dragged my best friend for protection. This other girl was still standing up. I dragged her down, and then she tried getting up again. I said, "You need to sit down, stay down." Shots were still going off.
Hospital doctors in Orlando say many of the injured are still fighting for their lives. At a news conference, another survivor described how the attacker kept on shooting at the dead and wounded as they lay on the ground.
I can hear the shotguns closer, and I look over and he shoots the girl next to me. And I'm just there laying down. I'm thinking, I'm next, I'm dead. So I don't know how, but by the glory of God, he shoots towards my head, but it hits my hand.
In Washington, President Obama praised police for their efforts to fight terror and called on the opposition Republicans to stop blocking efforts to tighten gun control.
Reinstate the assault weapons ban. Make it harder for terrorists to use these weapons to kill us. Otherwise, despite extraordinary efforts across our government, by local law enforcement, by our intelligence agencies, by our military, despite all the sacrifices that folks make, these kinds of events are going to keep on happening.
The motive for this act of extreme violence isn't yet fully clear, but what seems certain is that Omar Mateen was driven by hate. Meanwhile, across the world, many people have joined together to simply stand against that hate.
Well, I'm joined now by Dr. J. Reed Malloy. He is a forensic psychologist in San Diego. Dr. Malloy, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. There's a lot to talk about tonight on both sides of the Atlantic concerning these types of crimes. I want to start with what happened in Orlando. When you look at the shooter, Omar Mateen, would you agree that it's appearing now that this may have been a self-loathing closet gay who just snapped?
No, I wouldn't say that that's clear right now. I think we have to be very careful in a lot of times the fog of information that surfaces after these events to make assumptions until all the facts are known. So I would not make any inferences about his sexuality, nor about what his motivations were yet. I think we need to stick very closely to the facts, and we have to wait to see what other facts are going to emerge over the next days and weeks before we draw any conclusions.
What about what we do know, Dr. Malloy, and particularly about the father here? The father has gone online condemning homosexuals. The father was interviewed, I think, in the last 24 hours, asked about his son's reaction to seeing two men kissing, and he said his son was angered and sickened by that, and that was a normal reaction. Can we not infer certain things about how his son would have self-identified, but based on what his father is saying?
I would not do that. I think there's tremendous pressure to do so, and there's tremendous pressure to reduce this case down to one or two motivations. The problem is that in a retrospect, as you look at these cases, oftentimes the desire to focus upon one particular cause is driven by the political agenda of the person trying to figure out what the cause is. So individuals that are looking for homophobia will find it in this particular case and say that's the central reason. Individuals that are anti-gun and pro-gun control will focus on the easy access in the United States to weapons, which is certainly the case. But I think we have to be exceedingly careful, and that's not the basis for a solid investigation.
Let me ask you to look over on the other side of the Atlantic and what we're seeing right now in Paris. This case, we've got a 25-year-old man who goes online after he kills two police officials, brags about what he has done, and says that he is one with Islamic State. How do we know he's telling the truth? How do we know that this isn't just a copycat crime for someone who wants attention?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the things we do know is that oftentimes in these cases, particularly now that young people will be inspired by saying that this is motivated by ISIS. What it does is it tends to be a way to self-aggrandize, to make one's act look much more important, to give it a certain noble cause, such as being affiliated with ISIS, to try to elevate it beyond just violent criminality. And so it's very easy to find right now an ideology such as ISIS to attach to one's motivations, which with the lone actor terrorists, the motivations tend to be much more personal grievance-based, and that the ideological framing, as we call it, is done in oftentimes very close time relationship to the act itself. And typically the phrases of that ideology are cherry-picked to somehow justify the personal violence.
Well, Dr. Malloy, doesn't that make the whole situation even more frightening? Let's imagine you've got a young person who is, troubled, has personal issues, and then something like Islamic State propaganda is readily available, and it's easy for them to hitch on to that. For security forces, for policymakers, then they have to try to decipher here what's causing it. At the end of the day, you're not going to know, are you? You're not going to know the truth. All you're going to know is that the outcome could be murder.
Yes, typically these acts can't be predicted. However, they can be prevented because these individuals don't snap. These typically unfold over lengthy periods of time. Oftentimes, there's a preoccupation with the group. In this case, it may be a preoccupation with ISIS. There'll be a lot of time spent online for a variety of reasons. It could be following certain Twitter threads that are put out by recruiters for the group. And then oftentimes these individuals will proclaim that they are now a soldier for ISIS. And so we watch for these changes from preoccupation with the ideas of the group to actually identifying as a soldier for the group. Also, very importantly, these individuals will engage in leakage. And what that means is the majority of them will communicate to third parties their intent to attack. And those third parties need to alert law enforcement that this individual is developing an intent to carry out some kind of violent act against a particular target. We know in retrospect after these cases that typically individuals knew of the attack in the majority of cases and did nothing.
Yeah, which goes back to the motto that we hear all the time: if you hear something, say something. Dr. Reed Malloy, a forensic psychologist in San Diego. Dr. Malloy, we appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.